away.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate being asked to come over. A little bit about my background. I've been an architect longer than I really probably can remember, but been practicing in the field of historic preservation since 1985. So we've got a few years experience, and it's a field I particularly enjoy, but our firm has done all kinds of things also. To kind of get started, we'll go through the whole thing, and this will be kind of a very comprehensive list. This covers a lot of different things. It kind of, out in the field, you kind of have to sift through some of the things to determine what really applies to your particular situation. But in general, this is a real broad-based bit of information for you to, when you get to that point and you're ready to start your project. The title sheet is I did it that way to emphasize the fact that hiring a general contractor is one thing, hiring a historic preservation contractor is another thing, or even hiring a general contractor with historic preservation experience. General contractors have a tendency to oversimplify a little bit. They'll think that they can do any project and so forth, and most of them can. But when it comes to historic preservation, you really want your contractor to have a sensitivity to the history and to the methodologies behind construction and so forth. A prime example is when we come to historic windows, and I've even had professional big-time contractors want to repair a window by, just caulking it and then smooth it out, and then we'll paint it and it'll be just fine. And those just aren't long-term solutions for historic wood windows. And if there's anything the state is particularly sensitive about, it's wood historic windows. And try to call them up and ask them if you can remove them. Boy, they're not happy about that at all. But anyway, so there are certain methods, and I'll single out windows here, but there are certain methods that are approved by the state, by the National Park Service. There's even published bulletins on how to do this. There is a full range of historic preservation briefs that there isn't an aspect of your historic home or your historic building that isn't addressed in a historic brief. But anyway, so it's very important that if you have a contractor that you want to work with that is not as briefed in historic preservation or hasn't done as much, then you really need to sit down and do some educating with them to make sure they understand that you're going to want it done a certain way. It isn't going to be the shortest way or the fastest way. It's going to be the most accurate way and the most historically accurate. Okay, I pressed the button. Casey, you told me that.
Up or down?
Left.
Oh, in advance. Okay, no logic there. Okay, you know what? If you're at the point now where we kind of have a feel for what we want to do, and we're ready to talk to a contractor. There's some things that you need to do prior to selecting the contractor. Like we talked about, they should be experienced. We want them licensed. They want the old scam of showing up at your door and for $50 I'll fix that hole in your roof or whatever it is. We don't want that. We want people with proven record that are recognized by being licensed, and we want them to. There's things like we want them to have improved insurance. We certainly want a minimum of 3 references, preferably not related to them, so that you get a sense that these people can perform the work and have the experience to do the work. It's even desirable, to go around town and look at their past projects and get a list from the contractor of some projects they've worked on, and visit with those people. Call them up and say, you know, were you happy? You know, please check with City Hall. How have they been? You know, have they been good to work with? You know, are they a royal pain? You know, but the main thing here is do your homework. Really know who you're working with. So, we've even advocated talking to other, you know, contractors. You know, they know the word's out on the town. They know what it's like to work with these guys, and a lot of times they'll tell you what it is. And then the Kansas State Historical Society maintains a list of consultants, and you can call them up, and they're very helpful. Whether it's a general contractor, with somebody in my position, offering my kind of services, or glass restorers, window restorers, there's a very comprehensive list up at the state that I'm more than happy to share with you. But the key thing here is really doing your homework, get to that comfort level before you just go in and hire them and go for it. Okay, once we've selected a contractor, we need to really define the work. And really, I think probably we should have been doing this before we hired the contractor. Whether it's a list, for instance, like how we approach particularly a residential job, we prepared and created well, it's got not a very creative name, but residential design information sheet. But it's a multi-page form that we have all our clients fill out beforehand. And if nothing else, it makes you get organized in your mind, and makes you list all the things that you want done. And you're going to, and then you're going to compare that with the experience of the contractor. You know, if you're focusing on historic windows, and this gentleman has never worked on windows ever, you know, you probably need to talk to some people that have, you know, historic window experience and so forth. But the key thing is to really define what your scope of work is going to be. As an architect, I come from the side of, gee, you really ought to have a set of plans. But at the very least, it ought to be a list, a very comprehensive list of what you want to do. And if you're not comfortable working with plans, the more information you can have down on your list or on your specifications that you work out, the better off you're going to be. And so that you can clearly define and work with the contractor and tell them this is the scope of work that we want to do. And by the way, if questions come up, why, feel free to just chime in. The plans, and again, whether it's plans or it's a very detailed scope of work or specifications, what we're doing here is creating a line of communication. And it's easier and much better for us to go through all these things now as opposed to in the middle of the job, and it's like, oh man, we didn't want that to happen, or we didn't understand that was going to be that way. Well, if we would have really communicated better up front and had more information, even if it's rough sketches, the idea is to avoid as much of that entanglement at midpoint of the job or at the end of the job. Yes.
Quick question. If you're in a historic district, what is the best time to approach the city with your plans to get approval?
What's the best time to create the plans?
Well, to take it to the city, if you know you're going to have to get a historic preservation approval or landmarks approval here, when's the best time to do it?
I'm a firm believer that you take it absolutely as early, if nothing else, to alert the city that you've got something in the middle. It may not be final, you may be, you know, the number of times that I've called the state and said, you know, I've got a client that's thinking about doing something here. Is there anything particular that I need to worry about, that I should be concerned about? And they've given me, you either good advice or put me in the right direction where I researched it, myself. I think that's the time to go to your, to the city, staff and say, we've got something here that I'm not sure quite how to deal with, and I need some help on, number one, who should I go to, and who should I be talking to, and so forth. But I think you want to do that as early as possible. And, you don't want to get too far into it and realize, oh, wait a minute, I should have talked to them a long time ago and talked to them about this. So I think the minute you want to do something, you'll go to city and get help from staff. And I know staff is more than willing to step up and give you the best advice they can. That,
Yeah.
well, back to the idea of the scope of work. Again, the thing we're going to do here is open, as I said earlier, open line of communications. The more we can communicate with our professionals, whether it's with an architect, whether it's with your contractor or whoever it is, the more you can communicate with them, the more we're going to decrease problems down the road. But the thing that we like about plans is that the more information you put on those plans is that, number one, we can tie a contractor and say, okay, here's our contract is based on sheet A1 through A2 or A3, dated this, and we've got legal documents now that we've tied our project to, and we've gone over them with the contractor, and we're pretty comfortable that we've got a scope of work that everybody knows what's going to take place. Plus, if you're seeking multiple bids, it gives you that common denominator of being able to get the proverbial apple-to-apple bid. There's nothing worse than to somebody give you a bid for a wood shingle roof, and another one comes in and says, I've really got a deal on really presidential style asphalt shingles, and I'm going to give you a price for that. Well, you didn't really tell them. You just said you wanted a new roof. Now you've got two systems that, I don't have any idea which is the best way to go. Now, historically, there may be a certain way you have to go, but if not, then you've got confusion. So again, it pays to get that information down up front. So the other thing is, if it's a historic preservation project, the plans allows us now to go to the state and say, here's our scope of work, and this is, we're going to take advantage of the state tax credit program because we're in a historic district or wherever we might be, or we're on the national or just state register, either one, and we want to create an application for tax credits. Well, if you've got a good set of plans, it becomes relatively easy to submit part 2 of the tax credit app because you've got your scope of work all outlined right there, and you've already said, I've got a problem with the brick chimney, and here's how I'm going to fix it. The plans say we're going to go in and we're going to rake out the old mortar that's turned to powder, and we're going to repoint it, and we're going to use a historic mortar mix, and it's going to match color. We've already said these things, so all we're doing is repeating that for part 2, and that makes that real easy. So that's another distinct advantage for that.
One quick question for you, Bill. Working for the city, when we are soliciting bids, we issue our fees, but how does an individual do it? Do they call different companies and ask them to bid, or?
Sure. Well, let's say that you've done some research and you've got 2, 3, 4 people that you want to do. It's really not very complicated. You call them up and tell them what your scope of work is. Are they interested in giving you a bid? I establish right up front, this is a bid project. And I want to be fair to the contractor. I don't want them thinking that they are going in and they've got the deal, that it's a bid project and that they'd be interested in giving you a bid. And sometimes you'll weed people out that don't want to bid it. They only, there's not a contractor in the world that doesn't love giving you a price, knowing full well that he's got the job, and so I've always been a competitive bid if there's a contractor around, he's kicking me right now, but I've always been a competitive bid guy, but you have to ask yourself, is bottom dollar what I'm after? If bottom dollar is what I'm after, then you want to go competitive bids. But if you're in a little bit of a hurry, you don't want to spend that 2 weeks to 3 weeks to bid the job out, and you've got somebody that you know is really capable of doing it, and they want to do it, and you trust them, keyword, and you trust them, then go to them and have them and negotiate a price with them. And you will save time, and you're reasonably comfortable that they're giving you a competitive price. But it won't be the lowest price. So you establish what's important to you. I can't stress enough having a written contract. The number of times that we've done things on a handshake, and I wish I could say I was totally innocent of that, but I'm not. And every time that I've done it on a handshake, invariably I've regretted it. But you want a contract, and there are plenty of sample contracts out there on the internet, or City Hall may have a sample that you can use, or the contractor will have a sample, and see make sure that you're comfortable with the way he has it. And then if you are comfortable, then take it to an attorney, have them review it, and see what they have to say and so forth. It's probably worth buying an hour or so of their time to have them review the contract and make sure there's nothing there that's wildly crazy, particularly if the contractor's furnishing the contract. Anyway, but the key thing is have something in writing so that everybody knows what's happening. We want to, there's in the contract, there's other things besides just tying it to a scope of work or to the plans. Very important that we tie it to things like how long are they going to be on the job, how many, what's an end date. Let's get that in there, we expect you to work 6 hours a day, whatever it is, and so forth. Because they have a tendency, particularly house builders and so forth, have a tendency to go out and get the job going and get everybody all excited, all pumped up. The sub's there, and then he leaves, and the subs are left to their own devices. And they're not always working as fast as they might, and so forth. So let's have a clear understanding of how many hours we expect them to be there, and then an end date, how long it's going to take to do the job. The other thing that we might mention right here is this should be spelled out in the contract, is how to handle lien waivers. There have been cases of where at let's say your project's a multi-month project. The prudent thing to do, although it's tough, but the prudent thing to do is literally get lien waivers every month that you write a check to, so that you know that the subs are being paid, that are doing the work, are getting paid on a month-to-month basis. But absolutely positively, I wouldn't make the last payment until I got a lien waiver that said everybody's been paid. But you're a little bit behind the 8 ball there, because it could have gone on for a couple of months and these guys aren't getting paid. Usually you'll hear something. The subs have a tendency to call the owner and say, I'm not getting paid. And then that brings it to a head real fast. But the prudent thing to do is, if you get your contractor to agree, is when you hand him a check, he hands you lien waivers that they've been paid.
Is it common for them to bill as they go, or you find some of them want like half of the project, you know, up front?
I find people that way and I don't deal with them. Absolutely, positively, I can't believe I haven't mentioned this after talking to you earlier. I haven't mentioned this already. Absolutely, positively, never pay a contractor up. I don't care if it's your cousin, your brother, or your best friend. Don't pay them up. That's just, we're finding this in the industry more and more, that people are wanting upfront payments, but okay, yes, sir.
Yeah, I find it common for somebody to ask for some money for materials or something like that, or half the cost of the estimate that they've given you. Is that acceptable to do?
It's becoming
It's
more and
still,
more prevalent. Casey and I were talking just before we started, and I had a remodel project on my own home that I wanted to do, and I had a guy that I really wanted to do the work. It really checked out well, had a great reputation, and he wanted money up front. And I said, I'm sorry, I just, not my philosophy to do that. I even offered to put the money in escrow. And I don't have access except for once we receive your pay application. Well, then I'll pay off of that, and we'll make sure the escrow account is capable of doing that, and we'll do it immediately. But he absolutely would not do it, and I said, well, then we just don't have a deal. And so I didn't work with him, and I really hated that because I really wanted to use the guy. But you're seeing that more and more. But the number of times we hear on Channel 12 or Channel 10, that people have come in and they paid money down and the guy walked or left, it's just not good practice. And still, the vast majority of people will start a project without being funded. But that tells me a little bit too, and maybe this isn't overly fair, but at least makes me question that if they don't have enough money up front or don't have a good enough credit with their bank, to start that first month,
yeah.
then, and even, you might compromise and say, oh, wait a minute, all right, 2 weeks. If you get this much done in 2 weeks, I'll write you a check in 2 weeks, but you gotta have this much done. Again, so you're not paying for materials for labor that isn't there and isn't done. And even if they wanted to bill you for material that they had ordered, I wouldn't pay on that unless I see it on the site and that you as the homeowner have control of it, and so forth. But so yeah, you never, absolutely never let and I'm not being derogatory to contractors. Right? This is just talking about good practices. Never let a contractor be your banker. You be the banker. You're the one dispersing the funds. There are contractors that will volunteer to be the banker and disperse the funds. No, we don't want to do that. And you want to remain control of your funds. But anyway, so lien waivers are important. Down payments are important only from the standpoint you don't have them. Other little things that, as far as the contract, we talked about working hours. We talked about specific dates, goals to meet. We've got to have it framed in. Let's say you've got relation coming. I've got to have the kitchen done by this. The rest of the house you could be working on, but I've got to have the kitchen done by May. That's established as a goal, and that's part of the contract. Are you going, as a homeowner or a building owner, are you going to furnish the bathroom and or water? Two key things. Are you going to let the contractor come in and use your bathroom, or does he have to furnish a porta potty? And so that's got to be at his price, but he's covered. You don't want them tramping through valves. Not too much of a problem with water, furnishing water, as long as you understand that they're going to be doing it, and that you're going to be home, so they're not just letting the faucet run out on the ground, covering the hose. And we've talked about lien waivers, and you know, understanding your contractor responsibilities, you as a homeowner, the contractor obviously has the obvious responsibilities in that he's building the project, but you as a homeowner have your responsibilities also, and make sure you understand what they are. There's a little bit of a quandary here with this particular part of it, because we want the contract signed before we start the work. But if this is a historic preservation project, we cannot start the work until we have got our letter from the state that says we are eligible for tax credits. Because the minute you start the work and are doing things, and then you go, well, wait a minute, we want to go for tax credits, too late. At least on the items that you've already completed. You cannot do work and then ask for tax credits. So I can't emphasize that enough, so that there may be, and you wanted to spell this out with the contractor, you may want him to be able to hold his bid and his price for at least 30 days while you get your application submitted for your tax credits. Ideally, you'll be far enough along before you sign the contract that you can have already submitted that, because you will establish what the scope of work is and so forth. But maybe not until that final negotiation and you finally sign it. But then you want to hold off. You don't want to do anything until you've got the letter from the state, which means you will have submitted part 2, and they have that on file, and they'll send you a letter that says we approve. There'll be standard stuff that appears to be meeting the Secretary of Interior guidelines and blah, 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 and so forth, and so you're approved for your tax credits. And we can talk about, while we're on tax credits, any questions in regards to tax credits and so forth?
Do you guys live in a historic district? You live in Contractor?
What the nice thing about tax credits here in the state is that we can either use them as a homeowner and take them off your taxes, or if you're a not-for-profit organization, you can literally sell the tax credits. And you'll get 87 cents, maybe 90 cents on the dollar, and that's just cash in your hand to do whatever you want. So it's a heck of a program. We didn't mention already in the contract, and we should have, that is the contractor give us any extra as far as a guarantee? Are we getting our standard 1-year construction contract? If we are, then we need to note that, when that will be, and in about a month before that date's up, we really need to walk through the house again and say, boy, this is not doing well, something's failed here, so that we can notify the contractor that, hey, you still have a financial obligation to this. And so it's kind of important to keep that 1-year anniversary in mind. Okay, anything in regards to the contract and so forth? During construction, this is very important to me that the homeowner maintain an interest. I have a weakness in that I watch construction shows and reality shows. It's amazing how you go, I can't believe they're doing that. And I literally was watching one, before I came up here, that one that's the people live in Texas that do the work and so forth. There's got to be more to it than what's on TV. But they do this minimal talking with the client back and forth, and the client doesn't have a clue what's going on. And then they show up and everything is just absolutely hunky-dory. They just love it, And I think, if they didn't do any more discussion or participating, because they don't want them. The contractor does not want them there. They don't. There's other shows that give me your key and I'll see you in 2 months. And it's mind-boggling to me that that they're gonna spend all that money, and they really don't know for sure what they're going to get, and they're not allowed to be on the job. I mean, it makes great television, I suppose, but it's a lousy way to get your project built and so forth. But the point of that is, as a homeowner or a building owner, be involved. If you're not gonna have an architect on the job, then you're the first line of defense because there isn't a contractor in the world that hasn't misinterpreted something or accidentally left out something. And you can get your hard hat on and you can go look and make sure the rebar, the reinforcement rods are in the trench. If you're doing something like that, or if they're not making sure they're not tearing out a window. No, we didn't want those windows going out. You said repair them, and so you need to be involved and ideally stay involved throughout the construction process.
I've got a question for you, though. In your opinion, whose responsibility would it be to make sure that you actually have your permit? If you need to get a permit for the project, whether it's from the city or whatever your local government.
Sure. Well, you see, you're bringing up a point that
Is that my job as a homeowner, or is that the contractor's?
well, I think it's a partnership, and you can tell that I'm on the end, that I don't get permits, because, I'm kind of glossing over that. But I think it's the contractor's responsibility to get a permit, and, absolute first line of defense. But, on the other hand, as a homeowner, I think you've got some responsibility to check to make sure that he got the permit. Because there's nothing worse than having the city find out about it by driving by and going, what the heck's going on there? They're not going to call the contractor, they're going to call it the homeowner, because you're the one that's available. And you now have got egg all over your face because your contractor is doing something that, hey, I didn't know we needed a permit. Well, I'm sorry, that's not really a good excuse. So I think it's the contractor's first thing that needs to be done. First of all, let's go back a step further. Is the man even licensed to do work in the city of Dutch or the city of Wichita or whatever? And I think probably it's the homeowner's responsibility, and as far as going clear back to when we talked about references and projects, it's really the homeowner's responsibility to even do that basic. Am I dealing with somebody here that's even licensed to do work in the city of Dutch? And then to make sure then, because what's the policy here? Do they post the permit on site?
Yeah, here in Hutchinson, they do. You get a permit card, from the building official, and you're supposed to post that on your front door, your front window, so
See, that's
city inspector can see it.
plenty of opportunity for the homeowner to verify that it's there and even read what the permit says. And then, sometimes that's a little bit of a surprise. But no, I think, again, it's contractor's first line of defense as far as he should be getting it, but the homeowner needs to reassure that he did get it. Well, we talked about this has gotten a little scattered, but the homeowner, as we said earlier, needs to remain involved. Whether your project is a 1 month deal, a 2 week deal, or several months, why, as you need to be involved because you need to know, number one, that the work was completed per the contract, which means that your scope of work or your drawings that you have done, it was completed with that, or is being completed for the scope of work. And then that if it's just a month project and now you're done, you needed to know that he did complete the work and done the way you wanted it, and now he's ready for payment. So if it's a multi-month project, you're checking monthly because he'll be sending you a pay request at the end of each month, and if you want to know that in fact he already has painted the inside of the house. So, some of this is obvious, but You know, you want to, as a homeowner or again, building owner, you want to be perfectly comfortable that the contractor has fulfilled his part of the bargain. And that's why, go back to the previous slide, why you need to remain involved, because it isn't really fair to the contractor to surprise him at the end of the job and say, I'm sorry, I can't write you this last check because you didn't do this, do this, do this, do this. Well, you should have been telling him before, and that's a good business relationship, and so forth. But the key thing is don't make that final payment until you're satisfied that the contract's been fulfilled and that you've got the things done that you want done. And I have a little general comment there that kind of goes back to the very first slide, and that was when we were talking about historic preservation. You know, hiring the contractor with the lowest bid isn't necessarily always the right thing to do, because once you really talk to these people and really interview them, if you find out the guy for another 2,000, if it's that size of project, you can get a guy that has gobs of experience in the field of historic preservation. It's probably going to be worth it to you because he's telling you something that you should know, and that is, hey, this project's going to take some detailed effort and so forth. And the guy that doesn't have the experience isn't figuring it, and it'll only be a problem for you down the road. He's going to want a change order. I had no idea I would have to do that. Well, but that's, you should have, but I didn't, so I want extra money. At a commercial project, just literally this last month, and the contractor wanted a change order. And if we had a good set of drawings, of course we did on that, but if we hadn't had a set of drawings, he might have got a change order. But the drawings clearly spelled out that you had to do this. Well, that settled it, real easy. And it hadn't been done yet, so he wasn't entitled to a change order. Okay, that's any questions or anything? And anything that I didn't cover? Any thoughts come to your mind over there or anything?
Well, I get kind of a pop. The question that we have is how do you find out what the original look of something like, for instance?
What the original look was
Yeah.
of the house?
Of the house.
Okay. Well, there's a couple things. Number one, the city. The city has a fairly good record. The historical museum right here. I would do research there. I would talk to the city. The Kansas State Historical Society may have a picture of it. There's several sources that you can go to and look for to find an original picture. Some of the work that we were doing on the other phase of this arrangement here, I contacted, when a homeowner contacted me, I contacted the state. They sent me out. It was amazing the amount of information they had on these houses, particularly the ones in the historic district, because they will have, all that research will have been done prior to becoming a historic district. So the State Historical Society is a good source. Glad to help you. They won't give you a problem. The city and the museum, city museum or county museum would all be good sources.
I think even our library has an archive of some of the historic photographs.
Sure. The other place is old newspapers. We have found things in newspapers that have helped us immensely. We were trying to get a building on the National Register at the time. Well, we had to. The state was, we think we got to go here. We think this is going to be good. We like it and so forth. But since you're coming at it from an economic point of view, we want more information on the economic impact this building had on the downtown area. And we went to the archives, and they were at the library at that time. And my goodness, the businesses, the building itself housed a lot of businesses that really contributed to the economic viability of the downtown. And so we were able to cite this number of businesses, and that got it. And so it's interesting. You never know for sure where your historic information is going to come from. A real odd example, we were working on a building clear out in Smith Center, and couldn't figure out how. We knew the windows were subdivided and had muttons and mullions in them, and we weren't sure though the configuration. And we were out there and we were measuring, we were doing things, and a lady came by with a very old plate that, the church plates, where they'll get churches done, they go out and sell them. She had a plate of this house done in the early 20s or something. Well, there was no reason to think that probably wasn't pretty accurate. And we used that plate as it shows us the configuration of how that window was divided. It was very historic, people loved it, and we were in good shape, but you never know where that's going to come from. Another example of we were doing a project, and it had a clay tile roof, and weren't sure of the color of the clay tile. Chances are it was red, but weren't sure. I talked to a local historian. I believe that was a green tile. Oh, gee, no, I don't want to hear that, But anyway, so we started doing more research and went online, found a postcard that had been colorized, and it showed a red tile roof. Okay, why would an artist paint it red if it was green? So that was we're beginning to think it was red, and then we found out that this happened to be a depot, and we knew that the Missouri State University had a lot of the archives of the old Frisco Railroad, and so we had called them up, and we can do some research for you. We can't do too much, but we can do something for you. And they sent us a bunch of papers, and I was reading it, and in 1917, this guy from the railroad came and did a physical assessment of the building. And they went through the whole thing, brick building, wood windows, and so forth. The bottom of the page, red tile roof. And you just, as a preservationist, you go, all right, that told us, what it was. And the frosting on the cake on that particular story is that we were excavating for plumbing, and we found remnants of red tile. And not only did we find the remnants, we found an actual tile that was pure luck, that was the exact same size that we specified, and lo and behold, it was the exact same manufacturer. They were still in business, and that's who we specified. So anyway, sometimes you're very lucky. Anyway, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No magic to it, just hard work. Anyway, anything else?
I guess if you're in the thick of a project and it turns out your contractor just isn't following the specifications, especially if it's a historic project, what are some suggestions to back out of that?
Okay. Well, ideally, your contract, would have had some clauses in there on how to end a project. A common term is that an owner can end a contract or sever a contract. The term is for convenience. And if it isn't going well, and if that clause is in there, then you can just write the contractor and say, this is not, we're not happy. It's just not, and here's the reasons why and so forth, and we want to sever our relationship with you. And you can do that. You absolutely positively don't want to have a contract that doesn't spell out a way to get out of it if it isn't going right. So, but there is that term for convenience. It's a kind of a nebulous term, but it's been used.
To go back to kind of where you first started, talking about, going out for bids, asking for a bid project, where would you start to even find the right contractor if you didn't know where to look?
Well, the first thing, in some respects, I think we're lucky here in Hutch in that we have a historic residential district. And somebody starting now can't be the first person on the block to have done the project. So I'm being a little bit chicken here in that you go to the city, find out who's done it, who's been doing work in their historic district over the last 3 or 4 years, and that would be a good place to start because they will have had to conform to historic district requirements and so forth. There is talk to you talk to neighbors and that kind of thing, and see what other people have been doing. But there's no. I wish I could tell you there's a list, but no, that's not true. There really is a list. It's at the State Historical Society. It's not very comprehensive, but there is a list maintained of people that have done various things. So I would say start with the city. And what contractors have been working in the historic district, and number 2, call the state and say, I'm looking for a contractor that has experience in historic preservation. They will send you, they won't talk to you, but they'll send you a list that will have a list of contractors on it.
But it could be that you'll have to go out of town to find enough people to submit bids if you want to do that.
That's a good
point. I can only imagine that there's very few contractors in Hutchinson that actually specialize in doing historic work.
It's getting better. Since 1985, when we first started, there just wasn't. Historic preservation was almost a bad word. It wasn't a field that anybody even wanted to be associated with. And it's gotten much better among contractors, particularly the commercial contractors that do commercial buildings. So we're seeing a lot more of them now that have a sensitivity to it.
Every once in a while you'll find a gym that somebody who just loves doing that work, and he does everybody's work.
Yeah.
Maybe you can find that guy.
Yeah, that's right. But I would start out locally and see what is being done locally, what's been done over the last couple of years, and so forth. And then next trip, before you do it, why don't you talk to the state, see if there's some cross-referencing and somebody locally appears on that list. Gee, that's really great. So,
Thanks.
that'd be a little time, a little short, but.
Now, how do you get a contractor to respond to you at all?
What?
But now, how do you get a contractor to respond to you at all?
Well, I tell you, right now, it's tough because there's a lot of work out
Because
there.
they're busy.
Yeah, they're busy. And in some respects, that may mean that really makes sense to postpone the project for a little while. Particularly, it would behoove you, if it's pretty much an inside project, then wait till, October and so forth. And now, somebody that's looking for an inside job is going to be more willing to give you a bid and so forth. Because they like it better than nothing to have some work throughout the winter.
Right.
And so forth. So think of those kind of terms and so forth. But you're right, everybody's busy right now. It makes it doubly tough. At the very least, you have to be prepared maybe to pay a little more and to be a little more flexible on the schedule. But again, even then, you've got to watch them because they may take the job thinking that, okay, we got the job, but we can set on it. for 30 days. So you have to be very clear with your contract that, and be prepared that, okay, they're going to, all right, we'll live with it. We want him on the job, and we're willing to wait 30 days before we get it, but we've got the contract and he's signed up and we're ready to go. So, that's the trouble with this business, is all little variations to it that you have to kind of be prepared for. So,
Would you recommend having those contracts notarized, signature notarized?
that isn't a big deal to me. I very rarely, even our main commercial contract, we don't notarize them. We, I think we, certainly you as the guy signing it, the homeowner, you know who you are. I think you can be reasonably assured that the guy you're signing the contract with, if you have done your homework and checked it out, that he is the guy who's authorized to sign it. I'm not saying